Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
My name is Eric, and with me on Double Feature is Michael Kester.
Oh, hi. Yeah, it's really nice to be here today.
Michael Kester, we have a couple movies that are going to be on this show.
We do.
Now, let me tell you, it's hard to move away from horror films.
It is.
But we got a lot of them last time, and I think this time we're going to do, I don't know, let's call them science fiction films.
Sure, yeah.
I don't feel a lot different when I'm watching a science fiction film than a horror film.
No, I don't either. Because normally
especially
science fiction
80s,
is horrifying.
Right? Yeah. Well, so we have the 1988 version of the Blob. We're doing a little kind of some of my favorite sci-fi, some of your favorite sci-fi.
Yeah, that's more or less
if I could claim rights, if I could plant my proverbial flag in the Blob,
okay,
what would you say your half of this feature is?
I'm gonna have to say that my claim lands on Mars Attacks.
Yeah, I didn't give you a lot of choices there because
it's okay. I think that would have been the one I chose.
Okay, right. So yeah, the 88 version of the Blob, not the earlier one.
Right.
And
not the later one.
The only version.
Not the Rob Zombie version.
The non-existent Rob Zombie version of the Blob.
Right.
Yeah, that's one of those things that just disappears into the ether eventually, right? No one will know that Rob Zombie was once slated to direct a remake of the Blob.
We can all rest easy.
Now, I've been keeping a secret from you as well.
You keep a lot of secrets from me on the show. Sometimes I don't even know what films we're doing until you hit record.
Well, it's funnier if I tell you on the show is the reason for that. But I just found this out a couple minutes ago.
Okay.
So I'm not going to pretend to have known all about this. This was another happy accident. This is a Cronenberg cinematographer double feature.
Really?
Yeah, it is. I'm not going to say much about that right now. We'll get into it as people are using the chapters and skipping the spoilers.
Wow, okay.
Use the chapters if you'd like to skip the spoilers. So if you've never heard double feature before, which is, I assume, everybody who listens, we spoil both of the movies.
Yeah, we do.
It's
one of our fortes.
You spoil the Blob and Mars Attacks. Yeah, it's one of the few things we're good at. I don't even know if that's true. Half the time I think we spoil.
Blow it. We usually blow the spoilers.
Well, we get to the end of the movie, and then it's just sort of, and the movie ended, and let's talk about the next movie.
We talk about the films, and we give the audience, our audience, Podmanity, a lot of credit for having watched them. Yeah. So we end up not spoiling it. I think in our head, we're spoiling it by asking them to watch the film.
I just get excited for the next chapter, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah, that's true.
We're going to get to the end of the Blob, and I'm going to say something like, blah, blah, and then this happens or something, and Mars Attacks.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to be really excited about Mars Attacks until I realize we have 2 more films we could do next time on the show.
Exactly.
So if you just want to hear the exciting parts, you can use the chapters feature to skip right to the first 12 seconds of each segment, each chapter of the show today. Let's start with the Blob.
All right.
So before we talk about the cinematographer thing, I want to talk about Chuck Russell.
All right. Well, we have to make this first 12 seconds really exciting.
Oh my God, Chuck Russell.
Chuck Russell. My fucking God.
Well, we have enough vulgarity, I think, so we at least cover that portion.
Yeah, Jesus. Goddamn.
Chuck Russell's the writer-director of this remake of The Blob. I don't even want to call it a remake.
I don't think it's just another movie.
It's Chuck Russell's The Blob.
Yeah.
We've really been hitting the writer-directors this year. Always good to see.
It's the way to do it, man. It's the way films, I think, come out the best. Because if you hate them, there's a really clear reason.
Fuck that guy.
And if you like them, there's a really clear reason. You don't have to get into
There's no ambiguity.
Yeah, you don't have to get into the weird mixology of, well, I kind of like the cinematography and the screenplay, but I think the plot and the camera direction was a little weak.
Right.
We don't do that on the show. It's easier for us to just come in and go, that guy fucked up.
You don't get into that Tron Legacy thing where there's 100,000 animators, so you're not sure who to pat on the back for, hey, good job on the way that movie looks.
Yeah, exactly.
Chuck Russell was also the writer-director on the 3rd Nightmare on Elm Street movie.
Which would be Dream Warriors?
Yeah, the one that everybody loves.
Yeah.
That's definitely, I think when you look back at the Nightmare films, the one everybody goes, I have an hour and a half to kill. I'm going to watch that one.
Well, I think that's the second one. I think the first one you choose is the one where someone's blood gets splattered all over the ceiling.
Sure.
Followed by I Can Walk When I Was Once in a Wheelchair.
Well, I would start with the first one and then somehow convince myself I have time for the rest of the franchise.
They all have great graphics.
Oh, Nightmare on Elm Street. I miss you terribly.
Other films with great graphics include The Blob.
Right. Well, you have a mixture of practical effects and great graphics.
You do.
Right? So you have that kind of signature Chuck Russell, who also directed an episode of Fringe, by the way.
Yeah,
and
Fringe is great. Everybody watch Fringe. Don't watch Lost.
It's the I want to say like the 6th, 7th episode of the 3rd season when they're in, I can't spoil Fringe when all that crazy stuff is happening.
You literally can't. It's almost impossible to spoil Fringe.
It's impossible. But I imagine Chuck Russell's episode being the one with blue light pouring out in beams from behind a forest tree full of fog. That's just that look from the 80s where everything had a ton of fucking fog in it.
Yeah, including the intro titles.
I was going to say, except for the John Carpenter film, The Fog, which had, back when we did The Fog on the show, I believe I complained that there wasn't enough fog on the film The Fog. That's the kind of astute observations you get here on Double Feature. So this is why we have all new listenership every episode on the show. The cinematographer on this one is Mark Irwin. So Irwin did Scanners, Videodrome, The Fly. He did a lot of that earlier Cronenberg stuff. In my head, I go, 3 of my favorite Cronenberg movies. But I love all the Cronenberg movies.
Oh my God.
We're going to get to the Mars Attacks portion, and I'm going to think, all my favorite Cronenberg movies. So let's completely switch topics then. I want to talk about wiping out on your bike in front of a homeless man.
Oh man, the single most humiliating thing.
Really, I was just thinking
that can happen to a person.
It's really fucking embarrassing. But so this is some of that fun Chuck Russell stuff I want to talk about. And I love me some Chuck Russell.
Yeah.
He's done, as we'll see with all the cinematographers on the show today, and later in Chuck Russell's career, more modern movies, perhaps of a more questionable variety. But, even he had that period in the 90s when he was doing stuff like Eraser, that Schwarzenegger film that gets a lot of attention.
He does a lot of stuff with neon titles.
Did Eraser have a neon title?
Yeah, it was green.
I don't remember that at all.
Pay attention.
Oh, and there was a refrigerator. This is not the Eraser episode of the podcast.
Yet.
We'll get to that next week.
Eraser and Eraserhead next week.
No, but what I was getting at is Chuck Russell juxtaposes this guy falling off his bike in front of a homeless man. Really, the only purpose of this, I think, is so that we feel terrible for this poor little rebel.
Well, also, it's the beginning of the hamster jump. You need to set up your hamster jump for later on in the film.
Yeah, that's true. So maybe there's a couple purposes it's serving. I just go through this whole movie thinking, God, that poor kid. Yeah. Everybody is just fucking picking on him.
It's true. He really gets a bad rap, and
he does.
You never see him do anything wrong. Maybe drink underage, right?
Sure. Well, he's being a rebellious teenager,
but he doesn't do anything really wrong. However, the cop is so sure he's going to end up in prison within the next few months.
Well, he's got a shady past.
Yeah, and the town seems to feel the same way. A kid ends up mutilated and they immediately go to that rambunctious youth probably slaughtered and mutilated that kid previously underage drinking, but now that he's over 18 and juvy's out of the question, he is a fucking maniac.
Well, it says a lot about that small town. It says a lot about running into the drugstore clerk in when you go to pick up your girlfriend for a date. I was seeing a girl briefly, long story, that the Blob ruined the punchline too. But it was in a small town, and that shit happened all the time. We would run into her ex-boyfriend all over the fucking place. When there's only 20 people in the town, those people have to have jobs. Yeah. And if you're going to leave your house, you have to go to those places.
Sure.
And you just fucking run into them everywhere. So this kid, another result of being in a small town, if he's the only rebellious kid, it doesn't really matter what his past crimes are. He's the usual suspects, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if someone winds up mutilated, well, who's it going to be? It's clearly not that preacher. He's a man of God. So it must be the guy who was in juvie.
Yeah, it's not Letterman Jacket. It's not Amanda, or sorry, Shawnee Smith. I get those names mixed up all the time.
I imagine that in the prison system, it's basically just one cell where they occasionally lock up that kid.
Yeah, sure. It's like the Andy Griffith Show where Otis comes in drunk and he just kind of has a room. It's almost like where he stays.
I was going to say it's like Cemetery Junction, but we can go with that instead.
Oh yeah, yours is better.
So he wipes out on his bike in front of this homeless guy, and Chuck Russell decides to juxtapose that with the crowd cheering in the beginning.
Yeah.
I think all of the best 80s films start with some kind of cheerleading montage mashup. It's just where you want to be in the 80s. you're going to probably scoff at me because you listen to actual music, but I'm listening to some music that the kids listen to these days.
Oh, no.
And as you know, I get incredibly excited anytime
Before you tell me who it is, I just want to come right out and say I don't like any of the music the kids are listening to these days.
Have you heard Sleigh Bells?
No.
Okay, so this might not be terribly bad. Sleigh Bells is, no one cares about any of this. I'm going to keep it on the show anyways. Sleigh Bells is this kind of electronic-y thing.
Okay.
But it's this dude and this chick, and the girl sings in a very kind of peppy sort of pop style, but the music is this, it's meaner than it needs to be.
Okay.
It's just this incredibly bassy, aggressive, and the album cover is some kind of like 80s cheerleader pyramid.
Okay.
It's just wonderful. And it makes me want to make an 80s throwback film. So I listen to it all. It's the happiest thing I listen to.
Well, when we get to Mars Attacks, I'll talk about the record that I just recently bought when we're talking about Annette Bening.
Ooh, exciting. So you get that juxtaposition of the crowd cheering there. But Chuck returns back to that kind of idea when you have the Blob attacking the AC guy, the movie theater guy who comes to check on it.
The hot dog guy from The Happening.
Well, yeah, right after that, and it comes down from the ceiling or whatever, and then it cuts to that crowd reaction of
scream.
The movie. What's the name of that movie? It's like
Garden Tail Massacre?
I think it's Garden Till Massacre.
Garden Till Massacre.
I'm not sure what a garden tail is.
I don't know. It's a tale from the garden.
But it's probably different than... I'm going to take you to task on the name of the fake movie within the 1988 version of The Blob right now.
What else is new?
Let me tell you a little bit about Garden Till Massacre. It's your basic
slice and dice.
Oh, great. A killer with a hockey mask.
Yeah.
This movie's just teasing
Slicing
us.
up teenagers.
From the guy who made the Nightmare films, it's kind of weird to
I think that's probably a jab.
Hockey mask, chops up teenagers. My favorite part, though, is don't worry, there's no sex or anything in it.
There's no sex or anything bad, I believe, was the line.
It's perfect. And this isn't just one of those things, they're from a small town.
Right.
You know, this is, especially in the 80s, that was the height of... Man, we always go back to Silent Night, Deadly Night. Mm-hmm. But that's what I think of when I think, let's have a silly, worthless protest of slasher films. I think Silent Night, Deadly Night is really about as serious as anyone ever deserved to take any of that shit. Probably far more serious.
Absolutely.
But as we look back on it now and mock it, that's as serious as it should be taken. They do come from that. That's what it is, though. It's a skiing town. That's how you know this is Lumberton, right? Uh-huh. It's a small town, and... The big busy season, the tourist season, is when it snows and people ski, I guess. The reason The Blob is honestly one of my favorite science fiction films, especially one of my favorite 80s sci-fi films, and that feels so awful after we just mentioned The Fly.
Is it because it's gross?
It's fucking gross.
Yeah.
It's bloody and it's gross, and this is the closest I get to your brand of... sort of Peter Jackson vomit stuff.
Yeah.
Because it all has that same kind of nasty fluidity.
Yeah. It's bloody. It's hyper gore. It's taking gore to this level that it's not like what we were talking about last week. It's taking gore to this level where it's so extreme that it's beyond reality.
It's the unnecessary aggression from Sleigh Bells. That's what it is. It just doesn't need to be there. Like, come on, that's a little mean.
You don't need to see a guy get his head sucked into a drain.
Sure.
But you
it's there.
Really deep down love when it happens.
Oh, you so do.
And you can disconnect yourself in a way that makes it more fun and horrific than just plain horrific.
Yeah, poor
It's probably because
George,
it's purple, right? It's purple goo or pink
It's kind of pink.
It's bubble gum.
Yeah.
It's people getting eaten by bubble gum.
Sure.
At the end of the day, it's the old Goosebumps book, The Blob That Ate Everyone.
Yeah,
and
right. Is that what that was called? The Blob That Ate Everyone?
And it's just gum eating people.
Well, so this gets to my deep down secret. I mean, I can come on here and just say that, I love The Blob and it's one of my favorite.
And no one will
question it. Yeah. But of all of my favorite villains in cinema history, I've never told you this, but The Blob is one of my favorite. Yeah. And I have no explanation for why that is. It's weird because it has no personality to it.
Sure.
From listening to the show and from doing the show with me, I mean, you and I talk about these villains, these great cinema villains all the time.
Yeah, that's really one of our staples.
It is. I mean, we like these complicated characters. We like villains where they're not, static. They're these intricate sort of characters. Maybe they're good men making bad decisions or vice versa. or they're put in a tough spot, or
It's
like
the
they
science of evil, really.
well, like they would have us believe the hazmat team is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That they just have to make a rough decision, but they're also twirling their mustache. The Blob isn't any of that. It has no deep character traits. I like no complexity. It's fucking faceless.
And go figure, you love Jason as well.
Yeah, yeah, isn't that strange? It's unknown, and I think the thing I like about it is how relentless it is, how it just keeps growing, and it's the other direction from that, that villain, that complicated antagonist.
Sure.
Instead of a real man with a real past who is making real decisions for whatever reasons, and that being interesting, we have a faceless chemical that is just roaming around the street causing scenes that I like.
Right, and you don't need to examine it. You don't need to figure out how or why. It gets in places because it's a gelatinous blob.
Yeah, right.
That's how it gets there.
Yeah, sure.
And what it does is kill people.
Yeah.
The rest is unnecessary.
Man, that fucking George getting sucked into the sink, though, is really... it's kind of reminiscent of Sleepaway Camp, which I think after having seen Sleepaway Camp since the last time I saw the Blob, it gives me the sort of renewed satisfaction about that. But the bloody feet and the sink, splitting open on the bottom and just the blood coming out, it's so perfect already. And then there's that pull away shot of just spewing up to the ceiling, which you can do with the Blob. Things are just always spewing everywhere. It's either bloody or it's invoking blood through other visual imagery. Yep. And how do you not love that about it? But then you always underestimate it because it's a fucking blob. You hear the movie The Blob, and that can't be bloody or gross or disgusting. It's going to be silly. Yeah, it's going to be sticky, and it's going to be goofy. Yeah. And then the movie starts, and, it's not too far in before you're running in, oh my God, doctor, a man is dying. And that his fucking body is half melted, and you remember that the blob is fucking brutal.
And immediately following that is one of the things that really makes the Blob as a film stand out to me. You have these three initial characters.
Sure.
You have Kevin Dillon, the actor from Entourage, who plays the outlaw, kind of the kid who you expect to just be looking out for himself, be a total dick to
loner,
everyone.
Right?
Sure. Yeah. And then Shawnee Smith, who we talked about at length last week, and she's the goody two-shoes cheerleader, and then her boyfriend, who is the upstanding, heroic football player. The town loves him. He is clearly the protagonist.
Sure.
In 15 minutes, his face melts.
I know. Well, his face melts, and it's awful.
Yeah,
it's
and
terrifying.
you see this kid who you're expecting he's going to take charge. Yeah. He's going to be the hero of the town, and he dies. His arm gets ripped off.
Oh, God, fucking arm. The thing is the melting, right? The arm melting off and the face melting and making that warped, scary
Tarantino from Planet Terror face.
Well, Planet Terror got that's melting member, right? I mean, like, Planet Terror really got the melting things. Just fucking melt all the things. One of my favorites is when the girl falls on the theater floor towards the later section of the movie, when we were talking about them watching the Garden Till Massacre thing. And you forget about all the melting until they go to pick up her body. It's been it's been a good handful of scenes since we got any melting people. And it's just on the theater floor and sticky and bloody. And her that half of her body has turned into taffy. Oh, it's beautiful. It's not all melting. There's other effect shots of, when they're on fucking Makeout Hill or whatever. Yeah. And the girl's face just turns into a Halloween mask, basically.
It implodes. It's really bizarre to see happen.
It's nasty.
Oh my God, it's
beautiful.
Fucking great.
But then there's stuff you can only do with a gelatinous villain.
Yeah.
Like the phone booth scene. Yeah. Being stuck in the phone booth and it just being claustrophobic and suffocating. And this is, okay, so I'm going to outline right now why I shouldn't have a show on the internet. When you think infamous, horror scene with a phone booth, you think The Birds. That's what you're supposed to think. You're supposed to think, oh, the scary... I'm informing you because you also shouldn't have a show on the internet. Neither of us should be on the internet.
I don't think The Birds.
We're not even allowed to make YouTube comments at that. That's
I think my go-to phone booth scene is The Matrix.
You know what I mean? A scary...
I know.
Have you seen The Birds?
I'm just explaining my part. I have, and it was stupid.
Well, there's a bunch of birds attacking somebody. It's one of the Hitchcock movies we have not displayed on Double Feature.
Huh.
But people are going to think that's the classic horror moment.
Sure.
The birds and the booth and phone booth.
The birds and the booth, right.
does not hold a candle to the phone booth in The Blob. I always think the phone booth in The Blob. She runs in and it's suffocating. It surrounds her and so much better. I suppose that's the exact, this might be some homage to the birds, and maybe we owe something to Hitchcock for, no, fuck it. I just really
we
like
don't owe
The Blob.
anything to anybody.
I love The Blob covering the phone booth. I love it. I love everything about it. You love that it's Papa Corn at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
It expands. That's the great part,
I love my
right?
Papa Corn. I love one of my favorite.
What was the scene you were talking about when that came up?
It was this scene at the end where the blob comes out of the ground and it's grabbing the people and it squishes the guy against the sidewalk.
Yeah.
It's just like, I mean, Papa Corn is, I don't even remember why.
I think it was the third Children of the Corn.
It was Urban Harvest.
Here's the reason why. We were fucking delirious.
Yeah.
That's why. We were watching 13 Children of the Corn. I don't remember.
But one of my favorite horrible special effects, and it's one that no one uses anymore because it was just such a stupid idea, is when you film something, then you project that on a screen and then film a thing in front of the screen so you're filming the same thing twice.
It's practical effects.
In the 70s and 80s, they realized that you can rear project onto the screen and then act in front of it. Which is what they did in this. They have the clay bubblegum blob moving in front of scary people, but it's a rear projected screen of the people running around. See, in the 60s, in the kaiju movies, they did front projection. So you would see spears being thrown at the giant octopus, but you would also see the shadow of the spear going toward the screen, hitting the front projection. So at least we've got rear projection with the Papa Corn and the little fake model people that he's eating.
Technology. So, of course, if we talk about the Blob, we have to talk about what does it all mean? Where did it come from? Because otherwise, that second half of the movie you always forget about, where there's a bunch of people running around in hazmat suits. They're going to be really sad we didn't include them. I love this method of doing exposition. So this is another one. We're always talking about, hey, how do you get your exposition in here? This is where you eavesdrop on the exposition. And it's a way of getting around the eye roll. I mean, it's your fault. You're listening in on somebody else. This is just two characters having a private conversation about where the blob came from. And, they're not trying to explain it to you or give you a bunch of heavy-handed, but you know what? You show up and you're behind a bush and you're listening in.
Yeah.
And it's your fucking fault for having to hear this scene worth of exposition.
My feeling for exposition, I know I bring this up on the show all the time, but if it's not obvious and you can't draw the conclusions based on what people are doing and what people are saying when it's just inference, it doesn't need to be in the movie.
Yeah, right.
That's my personal opinion. You don't need to come up with a clever way to expose through dialogue or a sign.
Wow, you mean that no one would have asked where did the blob come from?
Nobody would have given a shit where the blob came from.
Here's the thing, though, is you have to get to the part at the end with the evil hazmat team.
You don't.
It has to be a government-run experiment, and you have to know that they're evil.
I love how you just say it has to. This is absolutely
This is necessary. It's necessary for two reasons. One, you have to suddenly put a face on your antagonist.
That's true.
Because you've been fighting a blob this whole time. Come on now. And two, we need a precedent for movie history to have an evil hazmat team. And I'm curious, this is another great, this is why we have a show on the internet, so we can ask this. Doublefeatureshow@gmail.com if you have a better previous precedent. But I always think of this as a landmark for the evil hazmat team that has to do it for the greater good.
Yeah.
I always think of the Blob. It's, it's the scene Close the Manhole, right?
Yeah.
Well, we'll just have to leave those civilians. You don't
Bill
have
Moseley
to.
is expendable.
Oh, I feel bad. Later, we would see this in Outbreak. We'd see it, Resident Evil. We saw it on the show in REC.
Yeah,
we've seen it on the show in a lot of different ways. Cloverfield had a take on it. It had a hazmat team, although they were doing something different there. Just because it seems like, okay, we're dealing with some sort of biology, something we just gotta bring in a hazmat team. But they're not the last villain we see in this movie. There's also the crazy religious, not necessary ending.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you get an ending like this, and it's a setup for a sequel. And the fact that it's never capitalized on, whether the intention is to make a sequel or not, sometimes it feels like a heavy, we're going to make a sequel, now we have an opportunity. But this just kind of feels like another way to say, you're fucked. This was only one incident of
Yeah.
the Blob. The Blob's going to come
Sure.
over time and time again. I don't
You
actually
can't win.
you can't win. Precisely. I don't actually want to see the Blob 2. I just want to know that somewhere there is going to be a crazy, and the fact it's a religious dude just
Sure.
makes it even better. That he's
And
got
a scarred religious dude.
Yeah, right. And a tent.
Yeah.
That's really the best kind.
Sure.
That's absolutely the best kind. It's invoking Carnival again. It's
That's
been a
what I
while
was gonna
since we did that. But yeah, we need a circus fucking sideshow, which is different than a
Fucking circus sideshow.
Yeah, let's go with that. Anyways, I just like to think about it, and that's all. And that makes it the perfect ending for me. Which brings us to what's the name of that movie?
Oh, it's called Mars Attacks.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it
it's
is.
probably the best handled Martian invasion film of the 90s.
Well, I know you want to hear all about this other Cronenberg thing, so you can finally figure out what the hell I was talking about.
Yeah, I am really interested to hear about this.
Well, so this is kind of weird that these movies came together this way. So The Blob was Mark Irwin.
Sure, Mark Irwin.
Mars Attacks. Now, after Cronenberg and Mark Irwin separated, I mean, he was using Irwin on a lot of his stuff. That's when Peter came in. You're going to have to help me with this last name. It's Suschitzky, if you want to look that up. Do yourself a favor and just Google Peter Cronenberg, cinematographer.
I believe it's
or something.
pronounced Suschitzky.
There you go.
That's the only time we'll say it.
But he did all of Cronenberg stuff, really,
Everything?
after Mark Irwin.
Oh, okay.
Well, from that period around, we're talking Naked Lunch and Crash
Naked Lunch.
and A History of Violence and Eastern Promises. Yeah, so he's involved in a lot of that stuff, and you get to see his handiwork in Mars Attacks.
Oh,
These
yeah.
are both, we could also say, films that maybe the cinematographer doesn't want us to drag out.
Yeah.
But you know what? I don't even know if that's true, because again, if you look at the other I Need a Paycheck movie, that these cinematographers are strange like that. Maybe a reason we don't talk about them a lot on the show is their body of work is always so mixed.
Yeah.
This guy did the fucking Empire Strikes Back, right? He was the director of photography or whatever
Sure.
on it. But he also has a bunch of dubious stuff from the last 20 years that I'll let people find that on their own
All right.
and amuse themselves. But it's also the return of Mr. Danny Elfman.
It is. It's the triumphant return. The score in Mars Attacks. So Tim Burton and Danny Elfman, they have an innumerable amount of memorable scores. Beetlejuice,
Certainly.
Edward Scissorhands, Nightmare Before Christmas, Batman Returns, all of these scores and themes that Danny Elfman has done for Tim Burton are probably some of the most iconic, barring The Simpsons.
As you said each one of those scores, I wanted to interject. That's my favorite one.
Well, and don't forget Pee-wee.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the score. So many of those movies owed to their scores too. I mean, Nightmare Before Christmas, obviously being a musical film.
Sure.
But then Edward Scissorhands.
Yeah, you have Ice
such
Dance. Ice Dance is the one, right?
God damn it. We've mentioned that probably on every Burton show, I think. But then the Batman stuff. I mean, really every goddamn piece of it. And then you come back with Mars Attacks.
I think Mars Attacks is one of the most unsung Danny Elfman themes.
Yeah, right.
Because you're tasked with a very difficult thing. And I mean, we came to the conclusion that Danny Elfman is who you get for this.
Sure.
But you need to come up
Danny
with a
Elfman
score.
and then pull in the guitarist from Boingo Boingo.
Right.
Because you're not just bringing enough Boingo back for your score, I guess.
You come in to this film and you need to figure out how to terrify people because Earth is under attack by legions
Very
of
scary,
literal
very
little
scary.
green men.
Uh-huh.
But it also has to seem kind of funny.
Yeah.
It also has to be, you have to be terrified, but you have to laugh your way to the fucking morgue.
A terrifying giggle fit. Yeah.
You have, I mean, it's not really a theremin. It's not the stupid, your hands are levitating over magnetic bars.
Right.
It's a theremin sample on a synthesizer.
Sure.
Over these flourishing and diminishing string things and your standard orchestra. And it's so fucking cool to see it with these the vanguards of alien warships headed toward Earth.
Yeah.
Oh my god. And that's only following Flaming Cow Parade.
Well,
So-
it's one of those things Elfman's great at. His instrumentation often has a lot of character to it.
Sure.
When you think back to the early stuff, Beetlejuice was a lot of those instruments you hit with mallets.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then when you get to Edward Scissorhands, it's a lot of kind of that
Choral
bell. And the choral stuff too. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. you get a very distinct, I mean, there was kind of an era of Elfman stuff in there. So coming back for something like Mars Attacks, having, again, that distinct kind of instrument to...
Well, and the other thing about Elfman arrangements, and this is going all the way back to Oingo Boingo, is he's really good at separating instruments and giving them something that works as a whole, but everyone's not doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
And that comes through in Mars Attacks because you have an orchestra, which is it's a group of people. It's a massive thing. Kind of like the cast of the film.
Yeah, right.
And then you have this one instrument that is singular, but just as powerful as this mass of people, which that would be Jack Nicholson.
Just playing a couple of roles here and there. You know, it's, I think back to Pee-wee that way too, and it's been a while since I listened to that score, so I could just be misremembering it. But I remember that as one of those scores where it's very horn driven. Yeah. It's a lot of that almost circus music.
Yeah, it really is. It's circusy.
But it's a lot of those instruments pulling in different directions and kind of do it like they all showed up to do a job and tried to be their own star.
You're still
of the
talking
score.
about the cast again.
I know, I really am. Well, okay, so the cast of this movie is about 15 cameos, and then Jack Nicholson plays all the parts.
Yeah, it's bad CG, Jack Nicholson, and a million cameos.
Well, so who's in this movie? Because I don't recognize any of the faces at all.
So I promised, while we're still kind of looming on the subject of music, I promised that I would mention this record I bought.
Yes.
And then I'll tie that into Annette Bening, and then we can just fly into the cast from there, and I'll make this quick. Annette Bening she's the hippie role, right? She's one of Jack Nicholson's character's wives, the hustling cowboy gambler. Yeah. She's the just quit alcohol, free-spirited wife.
Sure.
And she's all kind of about the world, the karmic message that the earth has sent out.
Sure.
So in a similar vein, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but I bought the DRC music record.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Ain't It Unusual. What does Danny DeVito call it?
It Ain't Unusual?
Yeah, that one.
No, I bought the DRC music record, which is that Damon Albarn thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he took
is this new?
Dan the Automator and a couple other people, and they went down to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, hence DRC.
Oh,
and
sure, yeah.
They recorded a bunch of music with musicians in the Congo and using a bunch of authentic Congolese instruments.
Sure.
And then they programmed it and turned it into awesome digital fucking masterpieces.
Yeah.
And you can buy it, but 100% of the profits go to benefit the Congo.
Yep.
Not 10%, not 90%.
Sure.
They see nothing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I wanted to tie that in with Annette Bening. But she's probably the least of the cameos as well. She's the least of the cameos, at least for us on Double Feature. I'm sure there are Podmanius listeners who really know Annette Bening. We're not from that zone. We were born in the 80s and we watched movies from the 60s. So anything that happened in the 90s or 70s, we're kind of lost on. But there's Michael J. Fox, who we know from, obviously Back to the Future, but
big one.
The massive career he led after that.
There's also Glenn Close,
First Lady,
Sarah Jessica Parker, coming back from Ed Wood, where we had our Danny Elfman splits. Juliette Landau is not coming back.
No, she's not back. Unfortunately,
super sad.
But we get Pierce Brosnan.
It's true.
And Pierce Brosnan plays the
scientist.
Yeah, but the compassionate scientist.
Oh, right. Well, compassionate scientist, I think, is the. He's the one who, and this is the brief piece where I really love the message of Mars Attacks before it just becomes straight cynicism the whole way through. But we start off giving them the benefit of the doubt.
After the bird.
Well, before the bird. Well, even after the bird,
Both.
I guess.
Yeah,
right? Yeah, he's compassionate till the end, really. We go, well, they're an advanced civilization, so they're probably peaceful.
Sure. Unlike human beings who are a slightly dangerous, warmongering species, turns to look at Rod Steiger.
Right.
Who is the fucking... He wears sunglasses the whole time. And he's indoors the whole time.
Even when Pierce Brosnan's head is severed, I feel like he would have an appreciation, though, for... He might not stick up for how peaceful they are anymore.
No, but I think he knows why.
Yeah. Herbert West would definitely have an appreciation for those experiments.
That's true.
See, this is what I was talking about, actually. So when we were talking about severed heads back on the Reanimator show, and I was mentioning that sometimes they get really showy and CG, perfect example.
Yeah, it's true.
Just a couple short episodes later. And here we go, let's green screen the body. Hey, look, we can make the heads float. We can attach them to... Everybody knows Pierce Brosnan is just kneeling on a pillow and they're green screening his body out. and then he has a funny hat on. But
Yep.
the movie pretends that there's some real gravity at play,
Right.
and that his head is actually attached to this device hanging from the ceiling,
Right.
or rolling around on the floor, and he's not just wearing a bunch of blue body paint like he's from Arrested Development.
Well put.
Sarah Jessica Parker, on the other hand, they actually severed her head for this role, which is why you never see her in a movie again.
Yeah, that's
little
exactly
known
the
trivia
case.
fact.
Other people you never see in movies anymore.
All of them,
Lucas Haas, who
Okay.
plays Richie,
sure.
he's awesome in this movie. He's really good at this role. He was in Last Days, which that's really all we have to say.
Last Day is interesting.
But Lucas Haas has
Last Days, Schwarzenegger. Last Days? No, that's End of Days.
Yeah, no,
I was
you're-
thinking
you're
Eraser.
Yeah,
still.
no, I'm thinking Gus Van Sant. Last Days.
Oh yeah.
And then
Wow, hold on. Where are we? What bizarro dimension are we in? Where I'm bringing up the Schwarzenegger action flicks and you're bringing up the Gus Van Sant Death trilogy.
I think
How is that happening?
We're in an alternate reality where Martin Short is still playing roles in film.
Oh, that's weird too. Yeah, that's another person who vanished.
Not to mention Lisa Marie, whose career relied solely on her relationship.
See, that's
with
Juliet
Tim
Landau
Burton.
could have played Lisa
Absolutely.
Marie's role. It could have happened.
But
It
Lisa
didn't
Marie was
happen.
fucking Tim Burton at the time.
Okay, well that makes sense.
So that's how you get into the films, right?
Lisa Marie does have that great she blends in with a lot of the art direction.
Oh,
being
yeah.
that
She
kind
is
of
the cover art to this film.
Marilyn Monroe. Occasionally there's a really inspired piece of kind of lighting and art design. I'm thinking of the one in particular where she's behind the fishbowl.
Yeah.
And, it's just that light on her face. And, of course, she just poses.
Yeah.
That's what she does, is she stands around and gives off that glare. And she's obviously the most made-up person in the whole film because she's playing the hyper-stylized
Sure.
humanoid.
Right. She's their impression of a human being.
Yeah, so she's playing the magazine pinup or the,
Right.
the 50s pop art.
Well, and she has an arguably small cameo, but they get smaller.
Yeah, right.
Jack Black is in this movie.
Sure.
He has maybe...
He's gonna go on and save the day,
Yeah,
right?
he's the kid from the Blob, right? He's the hero from the Blob.
I don't think so.
He just gets his ass kicked. He is very,
Yeah.
but I think this is before people knew who the fuck Jack Black was.
Well, so this is what I'm talking about, though. They totally set it up as, all right, here's this donut thing. This guy's going to come in and he's going to be part of the army that saves the day or something. That doesn't happen
No.
at all. That does not happen at the slight. He's one of the first fucking casualties.
Sure.
I think he is the first. I was going to say main character. There are no main characters in this movie. His role is as big as the extras who are zapped.
Christina Applegate also apparently in this film.
Oh, yeah,
briefly.
that's true, too.
Mostly
Yeah.
her ass, but also sometimes her face.
I don't think you see her face for more than a minute. But that scene where she's outside the Greyhound bus that shows up from nowhere and goes to nowhere.
Yeah.
What Greyhound bus picks someone up on the
In a cornfield?
Sorry, but as a person who made a trek back and forth to Toronto many a time in an awful Greyhound bus, you got to wait in an awful bus depot. You don't get to just hang out on the side of the road with your family.
It's the same bus that only goes through the Children of the Corn 5 town once every 3 days.
Sure.
Same bus.
All right. Well, maybe I wasn't using that line. That's probably what it was.
Also, Danny DeVito has he's got a role, but it ain't unusual to see Danny
here's
DeVito
what I want to
in
know.
a Tim Burton film.
Just really quick. If you had Danny DeVito at your disposal, wouldn't you have him do a cover of Ain't It Unusual?
It ain't unusual.
God, I keep fucking it up.
It's not a question.
Well, you can't fuck it up because it's not the title of the song, right?
Yeah.
As long as I get the title of the actual Tom Jones song wrong, I'm correct. But you have the stage. You have Tom Jones on there. You have the backup singers. I would, for
Maybe
my
just
own
during the credits.
my own personal collection, I would have Danny DeVito. He'd do it.
Yeah, he would.
He probably did it.
He probably did do it.
I assume he tried to get Tim Burton to film it, and Burton probably wouldn't. They didn't have the time or budget.
Yeah.
Budgetary constraints. We'll never see that. They would do a duet. I mean, come on, so many missed opportunities.
So we're kind of exhausting our cameo list here.
Not true. There's 30 more, but go on.
Well, but there's two that I'm obviously saving because they are double feature cameos. They're not just film cameos.
Oh, really?
They are A1 Jim Brown,
Interesting.
who plays Byron Williams,
Great.
heavyweight champion of the world, and his ex-wife.
Who plays Coffee and Foxy Brown?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that show, by the way. Just want to apologize for that again.
That would be Miss Pam Grier. We have two blaxploitation stars making
look
a
at
cameo
that.
appearance in a Tim Burton movie. What the fuck? My childhood just collided with my adulthood.
If you okay, so not that I have a vendetta against never seeing that Danny DeVito footage, but I do want to talk about the budget of this film a little bit because I think when people think back to Mars Attacks and how did they get those celebrities and what the hell was Tim Burton doing and why does Mars Attacks exist and what the fuck is Cronenberg's cinematographer doing there?
Well, the one thing you don't realize, especially when asking your last question there, is how much of Mars Attacks is stock footage.
Well, it's going back to the Ed Wood thing. I mean, I don't think we even need to say that, right? But there's a lot of that B sci-fi kind of stuff going on. The idea of an ensemble cast like this not doing anything is a tactic from B movies.
The film relies on you accepting that it's cheesy.
The film relies on, and the score forces you to remember. Well, it's weird because I think they tried from a different angle to do the ambitious B-movie thing.
Sure.
And Warner just shit on their movie.
Yeah.
It's not that it's just, we're doing an Ed Wood throwback and that's why the movie is what it is. Because we've seen that. That's what Ed Wood was as well. It tried to bring a lot of those, Burton's idea there was let's make a lot of these Ed Wood type scenes actually work in modern day.
Sure.
He didn't just decide to do the opposite here. I think he was still going for the same thing. Warner, on the other hand, thought perhaps it would be more fiscally responsible to do the opposite. So they write up the script, and this was Jonathan Gem's idea. And where did he get this idea?
They're trading cards. Mars Attacks is trading card. I believe it.
Is it Double Feature's first trading card adaptation?
Yeah, until we do one of the Magic movies.
I was going to say Pokemon the movie, because that's actually a thing.
Double feature.
Is it too late for a Herman Cain joke, or can I still make those?
Go ahead.
I was hoping it would write itself.
So yeah, they're trading cards. Mars Attacks is a trading card thing. I don't know anything. I don't think there's a story.
It's similar to Dinosaurs Attack. That's all you need to know.
Very similar.
Dinosaurs Attack, too similar to Jurassic Park. Mars Attacks, didn't know Independence Day was coming out. Sorry, Mars Attacks. So I think this is a lot more Hollywood inspired. It's funny because the cynicism this movie has for Hollywood is...
cynicism this movie has for everything.
Well, yeah, it is everything.
The government and Hollywood.
Sure, the government,
both get their
Hollywood,
assholes
hippies. Well, I think it's just
big-brained aliens.
It's because all of the cameos. I just assume it's making jabs at celebrities because of Las Vegas is somehow the one place you can go outside of Hollywood to still make fun of Hollywood.
Sure,
maybe that's because it's
Branson, Missouri,
where Hollywood goes when it dies.
And then Branson, Missouri is where it gets resurrected.
So Jonathan Gems writes up this thing. He's the guy who did, this guy's got a lot of cutting room floor material, but not a lot of successful screenplays. So he writes all these movies that get picked up by studios and then they fire him and get other writers to come in and do these movies. He did Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian, which is a movie you've never heard of because it never got made. It's the Beetlejuice sequel that may or may not happen at some point
it's the Beetlejuice sequel that was inspired by the last 4 minutes of the Beetlejuice movie.
Well, I think the idea was, hey, wouldn't German Expressionism be really funny in a beach movie? So Gems comes up with this idea, and it's his baby, and the studio goes, great, let's fire you and bring in the writers from Ed Wood, because that's a good idea. And eventually Gems got back on and wrote the final screenplay and a novelization and all this stuff. Burton's not credited, but I seem to remember him, maybe he wasn't taking the credit himself, but I think Gems was really talking him up as having written a lot of the stuff that's in here too. So they start out with this projection, they write up a screenplay, and the studio looks at it and goes, oh yeah, that's a $250 million movie. We'll give you $60 million. Yeah. What can you do with that? So of course the first thing to go is the stop motion animation.
Yeah,
they just throw that out. Which, Henry Selick was busy anyways, right? He's doing James and the Giant Peach at the time. And after that whole awkward Tim Burton, Danny Elfman Nightmare Before Christmas thing, it might not be a good idea to pull the bad Selick memories back in. But maybe it would have been a big party. And all that could have been, we'll never know. I'm trying to imagine. This movie's hard enough to imagine in its present form with the CGI. It's hard to imagine stop motion.
If it weren't filmed and out for public consumption, I wouldn't believe that it existed.
Well, it's a weird kind of, usually CG looks passable. Most people, you and I bitch about it, but most people accept it.
Yeah.
And in the years past, I was going to say the years past its prime, but it never really has a prime. It just ages poorly, very rapidly. This CG started so poorly that it aged like a cartoon does.
Yeah.
Where you watch it now, and you can't possibly think they ever thought this would integrate with reality.
Right. Yeah.
It was always Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Sure.
But it probably wasn't. I remember seeing this movie in a theater. It came out, and I don't Tim Burton wasn't standing there going, hey, you're supposed to believe there's aliens interacting with people. But they do it in such a way where I could see where they would have tried to, and it's the type of thing they might have gone stop motion for a little more realism.
Mm-hmm.
Burton always wanted it to be outlandish and ridiculous, but I think you're supposed to believe that they're actually there.
Yeah.
And it's very painted on cartoon.
Yep. I remember when I first saw it, I don't think I even realized it was CG. But I was too fucking scared when I saw it the first time.
Well, they're skull faces.
They have skull faces with big brains, and they're mean. And I just couldn't get my head around why they were so fucking evil.
Well, and I love the idea, too, that what if aliens appear and they're just not marketable?
Yeah.
What if they're just too, everybody sees the aliens for the first time. They're all excited. Ooh, Martians. They flip on their TV, and exhaustively, humankind all goes, oh, they look like that.
Yeah.
It's the audience's response.
Sure.
They showed up for Independence Day and they thought, oh, this isn't a Ridley Scott film.
Yeah.
Which is also what audiences who showed up to Independence Day thought,
sure,
but maybe in a slightly different way. There's just no realism, and they look terrible. They have skulls, and they look very mean.
They're silly.
And they bark. They have the backwards quack.
They have a weird Germanic language.
Well, of course.
They sound angry no matter what they're saying. I love that about them.
Yeah, right.
I love that
Are you saying all Germans sound angry no matter what they're saying?
Yeah, I am saying that.
Yeah, German probably isn't what linguists would consider one of the romantic languages.
Not quite.
Nor Martian, so it's obviously very abrasive from the get-go, and then, we just start laser zapping people.
Blow up Congress.
A left and a right. Before we get out of here, I wanted to ask you about something.
Okay.
Now, you don't do a lot of acting yourself.
I don't do.
You do a lot of guitaring.
I do a lot of guitaring.
I don't do any acting myself. I know nothing about it. But between the two of us right now, you would be the acting champion, I think.
Yeah, sure.
You did a monologue one time.
I did. I did one audition in my entire life.
Now, if I remember correctly, that is the monologue. It's a Jack Nicholson monologue.
Yeah.
From Mars Attacks.
It was, in fact.
Yes.
It's
awesome.
It's the presidential monologue when he's talking to the alien ambassador, and he does
the shed a tear. Monologue.
Right.
Excellent.
The why can't we all just get along?
Right.
Monologue. That was the only. I didn't get the part, by the way.
Oh, well,
turns
that's
out
good.
what I didn't know is that you're not supposed to do monologues that you see in films because. You're supposed to read them and make them your own.
Oh,
but instead, I just kind of used a lot of what Jack Nicholson did.
Sure.
And because I thought it was brilliant.
You should have gone for his presidential monologue from the TV.
Batman? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, from Batman. I wish they would have just reused that. So here's what I'd like, because this doesn't exist on the internet. Some sort of side-by-side or shot-for-shot or YouTube mashup comparison of the presidential address from Mars Attacks on the TV with the Joker address on TV, because I always want to say it's reused, it's the same thing, or it's calling back to it, or it's a joke. I can't find it anywhere side by side. And
well, it's because there's other Batman movies that have clouded the search engine optimization.
It's true. It's absolutely true. That's precisely what's happened. So somebody find that, we'll put it on our website, and then you can Google it and it'll show up.
Wow.
It would be really funny if it were it's not just reused because it's specific to the movie, but it would be really funny if they save budget by just pulling that scene out of Batman and planting it in here, which is basically what they ended up doing anyways. My name is Eric. I'm here with Michael, and you've reached the end of Double Feature.
This is the best 12 seconds of this chapter, by the way.
At least the end of
it doesn't get better than
this episode of Double Feature. We have a website and an email address, doublefeatureshow.com, doublefeatureshow@gmail.com, a Facebook, and you can go on iTunes and leave us a review.
We're basically on the fucking internet.
So we're doing 2 more movies next time.
Yeah, we're going to do a pair of documentaries that have questionable integrity.
Okay.
The Last Exorcism and Exit Through the Gift Shop.
Oh, good. Back to horror. Glad we got that one week.
Yeah, Exit's really scary. So watch more fucking film.
And goodbye. Of the Blob. We're doing a little kind of some of my favorite sci-fi, some of your favorite sci-fi.
Yeah, that's more
so
or less
if I could claim rights, if I could plant my proverbial flag in the Blob,
okay,
what would you say your half of this feature is?
I'm gonna have to say that my claim lands on Mars Attacks.
Yeah, I didn't give you a lot of choices there because
it's okay. I think that would have been the one I chose.
Okay, right. So yeah, the 88 version of the Blob, not the earlier one.
Right.
And
not the later one.
The only version.
Not the Rob Zombie version.
The non-existent Rob Zombie version of the Blob.
Right.
Yeah, that's one of those things that just disappears into the ether eventually, right? No one will know that Rob Zombie was once slated to direct a remake of the Blob.
We can all rest easy.
Now, I've been keeping a secret from you as well.
You keep a lot of secrets from me on the show. Sometimes I don't even know what films we're doing until you hit record.
Well, it's funnier if I tell you on the show is the reason for that. But I just found this out a couple minutes ago.
Okay.
Like, blah, blah, and then this happens or something. And Mars Attacks.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to be really excited about Mars Attacks until I realize we have 2 more films we could do next time on the show.
Exactly.
So if you just want to hear the exciting parts, you can use the chapters feature to skip right to the first 12 seconds of each segment, each chapter of the show today. Let's start with the Blob.
All right.
So before we talk about the cinematographer thing, I want to talk about Chuck Russell.
All right. Well, we have to make this first 12 seconds really exciting.
Oh my God, Chuck Russell.
Chuck Russell. My fucking God.
Well, we have enough vulgarity, I think, so we at least cover that portion.
Yeah, Jesus. Goddamn.
Chuck Russell's the writer-director of this remake of The Blob. I don't even want to call it a remake.
I don't think it's just another movie.
It's Chuck Russell's
The Blob.
Yeah. We've really been hitting the writer-directors this year. Always good to see.
It's the way to do it, man. It's the way films, I think, come out the best. Because if you hate them, there's a really clear reason.
Fuck that guy.
And if you like them...
So I'm not going to pretend to have known all about this. This was another happy accident. This is a Cronenberg cinematographer double feature.
Really?
Yeah, it is. I'm not going to say much about that right now. We'll get into it as people are using the chapters and skipping the spoilers.
Wow, okay.
Use the chapters if you'd like to skip the spoilers. So if you've never heard double feature before, which is, I assume, everybody who listens, we spoil both of the movies.
Yeah, we do.
It's
one of our fortes.
You spoil The Blob and Mars Attacks. Yeah, it's one of the few things we're good at. I don't even know if that's true. Half the time I think we spoil.
Blow it. We usually blow the spoilers.
Well, we get to the end of the movie, and then it's just sort of, and the movie ended, and let's talk about the next movie.
We talk about the films, and we give the audience, our audience, Podmanity, a lot of credit for having watched them. Yeah. So we end up not spoiling it. I think in our head, we're spoiling it by asking them to watch the film.
I just get excited for the next chapter, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah, that's true.
We're going to get to the end of The Blob, and I'm going to say something like...
Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
My name is Eric, and with me on Double Feature is Michael Kester.
Oh, hi. Yeah, it's really nice to be here today.
Michael Kester, we have a couple movies that are going to be on this show.
We do.
Now, let me tell you, it's hard to move away from horror films.
It is.
But we got a lot of them last time, and I think this time we're going to do, I don't know, let's call them science fiction films.
Sure, yeah.
I don't feel a lot different when I'm watching a science fiction film than a horror film.
No, I don't either. Because normally science fiction is horrifying.
Right? Yeah. Well, so we have the 1988 version.
And there's a really clear reason. You don't have to get into the...
There's no ambiguity.
Yeah, you don't have to get into the weird mixology of, well, I kind of like the cinematography and the screenplay, but I think the plot and the camera direction was a little weak. We don't do that on the show. It's easier for us to just come in and go, that guy fucked up.
You don't get into that Tron Legacy thing where there's 100,000 animators, so you're not sure who to pat on the back for, hey, good job on the way that movie looks.
Yeah, exactly.
Chuck Russell was also the writer-director on the third Nightmare on Elm Street movie.
Which would be Dream Warriors?
Yeah, the one that everybody loves.
Yeah.
That's definitely, I think when you look back at the Nightmare films, the one everybody goes, oh, I have an hour and a half to kill. I'm going to watch that one.
Well, I think that's the second one. I think the first one you choose is the one where someone's blood gets splattered all over the ceiling.
Sure.
Followed by I Can Walk When I Was Once in a Wheelchair.
Well, I would start with the first one and then somehow convince myself I have time for the rest